Problem 10-31, Depreciation Schedules. On January 3rd, 2025, mail delivery service purchased a truck at a cost of $90,000. Before placing the truck in service, mail delivery service spent $3,000 painting it, $1,500 replacing tires, and $4,500 overhauling the engine. The truck should remain in service for 5 years and has a residual value of $9,000. The truck's annual mileage is expected to be 22,500 miles in each of the first 4 years and 10,000 miles in the 5th year, 100,000 miles in total. In deciding which depreciation method to use, Anika Sargent, the general manager, requests a depreciation schedule for each of the depreciation methods. So that's the straight line, units of production, and double declining balance. That's what those stand for up here. So requirement 1, prepare a depreciation schedule for each depreciation method showing asset costs, depreciation expense, accumulated depreciation, and asset book value. Begin by preparing a depreciation schedule using the straight line method. All right, let's start with January 3rd. What was the cost of the asset? So the cost of the asset, which is the truck, was the $90,000, but then we have to include all the other costs that were incurred to get the truck running. So for its first use, we have to add in the $3,000 paint job, $1,500 replacing tires, and $4,500 overhauling the engine. So let's go ahead and add those together. $90,000 for the truck, $3,000 for painting it, $1,500 for the tires, $4,500 for that engine. And that equals $99,000. And go ahead and input that for the asset cost. And then we have to take a look at the book value. What is the book value on the day we purchased it on January 3rd? Well, remember the formula for the book value is cost of the asset minus the accumulated depreciation on that day. And since we just bought it that day, there's no depreciation, so we can go ahead and input 99,000. And now it is 1 year later, so we need to do the depreciation for the asset. So we need to figure out the depreciable cost. Depreciable cost is the maximum we can depreciate the asset, and we can't depreciate all $99,000 because, again, there is a residual value of $9,000. So from 99,000, we subtract 9,000 in order to get 90,000 depreciable cost in the first year. And again, depreciable cost is the asset cost minus the residual value. And then we're doing depreciation with the straight line method, so we need to divide by the useful life, which is the number of years we think we can use this truck. So that is given to us here at the top of the problem. That is 5 years. So we can input 5 from the drop down. And now we calculate that depreciation expense for the year. So 90,000, clear this out, 90,000 divided by 5 years. And that's an annual depreciation of 18,000 for the straight line method here. So I'll go ahead and input that. And because we are using the straight line method, we can go ahead and input that all the way through, because that's going to be the depreciation expense for each year. So we'll input that here and copy this over as well, because again, that depreciation is the same for each of the 5 years in the straight line method. So let's next look at the accumulated depreciation for that year ending 2025. So how much depreciation have we had so far? Just this 18,000 here. So each year we have another $18,000, and so this is just the running balance of the depreciation altogether. So first year is 18,000. And now we have to calculate the book value at the end of this year of 2025. And remember, the book value is the cost of the asset minus accumulated depreciation. So we're going to have 99,000 as the previous book value here. Subtract that accumulated depreciation for the current book value for the end of 2025. Oh, sorry. And that is 81,000. So the next year here, we need the accumulated depreciation again, and this time we need to add the previous year's depreciation to the current year's. So that is going to be a total of 36,000. And then we can go ahead and subtract that next 18,000, because again, the depreciation expense for the year, 18,000, needs to be taken from the book value to get the new book value. And that is for the year ended 2026. And so we'll continue forward. Related depreciation for this year, 2027, is going to be that 36,000 plus this next 18,000. So let's go ahead and add those together. And that equals 54,000. And let me go back and fix this one. 63,000. And then our new book value is going to be that 63,000 minus the next 18,000. And that is 45,000 for the book value for year ended 2027. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for these next couple of years here. In essence of time, just going to input them here. So that's that 54,000 accumulated depreciation from the previous year, plus the new depreciation for the year of 18,000 equals 72,000, leaving us with a book value of 27,000. And then the last year here, we have accumulated depreciation of 90,000, leaving us with a book value of 9,000, which again is that leftover residual value here. And so if we've done this correctly, let's go ahead and check our answer here. Nice work. Okay. So next we have, before completing the units of production depreciation schedule, calculate the depreciation expense per unit. Round depreciation expense per unit to 2 decimal places. So in this case, it's per mile driven. So let's go ahead and get our formula in, and that is going to be cost minus residual value, and then that is divided by useful life in units, and those units again are those miles. So let's go ahead and get that amount here. So to calculate the depreciation per unit, which is depreciation per mile in this case, we're going to take the cost minus the residual value divided by however many miles we think we can drive this truck. So let's take a look at that here. We're going to take our calculator back out. So we have that $99,000. That was the cost, but we have to subtract out residual value of 9,000. And then we divide this 90,000 here by the amount of miles we think we're going to be able to drive this truck. And that amount is given to us here, 100,000 miles in total. So we'll go ahead and divide this 90,000 by 100,000 to get the units, and that is 0.9. So for every mile driven, the truck depreciates by 90 cents in value. Let's go ahead and check our answer. Fantastic. Okay. Now, enter a depreciation schedule using the units of production method. Enter the depreciation per unit to 2 decimal places, like this. So asset costs, this stays the same. Again, that was that $99,000 we calculated at the beginning of the problem. That's that cost here plus everything that took to get it ready to work in this first year. So that book value also stays the same again because there hasn't been any depreciation in the first year. Excuse me, on the date of purchase. So we know our depreciation per unit is that 90 cents. So we can go ahead and put that for all of these. But then take note that the depreciation in miles is different for the years, and that's given to us above. So number of units in that first year, 2025, let's have a look. It says the annual mileage is expected to be 22,500 in each of the first 4 years. So that's very important there. Do not miss that because then on that fifth year, it's 10,000 miles. So we go ahead and input 22,500 miles for the first 4 years. And then putting these right away kind of helps us avoid making the mistake of putting it in for the fifth year here. So we'll get 10,000 miles for that fifth given to us here. So now we can go ahead and calculate the depreciation expense for the year using these 90-cent units for this amount of miles here per year. So let's go ahead and calculate that. And that is going to be the same again for the first 4 years. We can go ahead and copy paste, make it easier on ourselves. And then for the final year, though, we have to pay attention here. 90 cents times 10,000, that is going to be $9,000. So then accumulated depreciation, again, similar to the above scenario, we go ahead and input how much depreciation we've had so far. So in the first year, 2025, we've had $20,250 dollars here in depreciation. So let's go ahead and do our book value as well. So the previous year's book value is that 99,000. We have to subtract the accumulated depreciation at this point to get our new book value at the end of 2025. So let's go ahead and input that there. And then if we add these through, so for the first year here, we have to add the depreciation expense for the year plus the previous accumulated depreciation. So let's go ahead and add those together. So we have 20,250 plus the same amount. And that equals 40,500. Their year ended 2026. And if we wanted to, we could just take the book value minus accumulated depreciation straight across, or you take the previous year's book value and then subtract the depreciation expense for the year. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we'll take 99,000 minus 40,500. That equals 58,500. And again, either of those methods will work for calculating the book value here. So next year, just in essence of time, we add that 40,000 to 40,500 to 20,250. So the new accumulated depreciation is going to be 60,750. And then if we just continue on down here, we can add another 250 to each of the years through the fourth year. And then finally, we add 9,000 to this 81,000 for total accumulated depreciation there. And then again, we'll math out the book value here by taking away accumulated depreciation from the total book value. So let's go ahead and do that for each of the following years. To save some time here, I'm going to do this on my own. Okay, let's go ahead and check our answer. Fantastic. Okay. Now we are moving on to double declining balance depreciation schedule. So we have to prepare that here, and we round this depreciation expense to the nearest whole dollar. So keep that in mind there. So on this homework problem, if you want to use Excel, you can go ahead and do that because, again, a lot of times in the real world, we'll be using Excel for depreciation schedules. So again, our asset cost is going to stay the same for date of purchase with that 99,000, and book value does not change on the date of purchase. So the formula for a double declining balance here is the beginning book value. So that's that 99,000 this first year. Then we have that multiplied by 2 times 1 divided by 5. And then that 5 stands for the 5 years that the truck will remain in service. So we're just doubling the depreciation here. So let's go ahead and calculate that. So we'll have 99,000, and then we're going to multiply that by 2 divided by 5. And that total is 39,600. And again, the way I calculated that, it's a little bit of a shortcut there, but you'll see it here up above in the notes. So in the first year here, the accumulated depreciation again stays the same, 39,600, because the year before we did not have any depreciation on it. And then we'll subtract the 39,600 from the 99,000 in order to get a total of 59,400 book value here at the end of 2025. So now we're going to take this book value from the previous year and plug it in for the beginning book value of the next year. So that is 59,400 for 2026. And then we'll do the same 2 times 1 divided by 5. And that is going to give us 23,760. And then the accumulated depreciation is just going to be the previous depreciation plus the new depreciation here. So that's going to be 39,600 plus 23,760. And that equals 63,360. Tongue twister there. And then that new book value, we just subtract again the 63,360 from 99,000. And that's going to give us our new book value here. So that's 35,640. And then that is also going to be our beginning book value at the beginning of 2027 here next. So we'll go ahead and input that there. And then 2 times 1 divided by 5 again, that's just that rate. And since we are depreciating this over 5 years. And so then when we do the math for this one, it is going to be 14,256. And then our accumulated depreciation again is going to be this previous 63,000 plus 14,256 here. And that amount is going to be 77,616. And then book value, we're going to take the 99,000, subtract accumulated depreciation, and that is going to give us 21,384. And that amount will also be here as the beginning book value at the start of this next year. So we're going to go ahead and do the 2 times 1 divided by 5 useful years there, and then that's going to equal 8,554. Accumulated depreciation again will just be previous depreciation plus current, and that is 86,170. And then subtract that from the book value will give us 12,830. And that is going to be our final year's beginning book value. And there is no value here for the double declining balance rate. You might be wondering why we don't have anything there. Well, first of all, the reason is because in the last year, the book value has to be the residual value. So we're not going to multiply anything over here because that amount would then depreciate the asset more than the $9,000 residual value. So we have 12,830 left as the book value at the beginning of the final year, but then we have to subtract out the residual value of the asset here, the truck. So that depreciation expense for the last year is going to be 3,830. So we can go ahead and input that there. And then when we get to our accumulated depreciation, again, that's just the previous year's depreciation plus the new depreciation expense. And then our residual value, of course, is going to be that $9,000 that was given to us here because that is what the value of the truck will be at the end of its life. And you cannot depreciate the residual value because you're going to sell it for that. So that's why we're doing it this way. All right, and we are almost done. Let's check our answer. Just one more piece here after this. So requirement 2, we have meal delivery service prepares financial statements using the depreciation method that reports the highest net income in the early years of asset use. Consider the first year that meal delivery service uses the truck. Identify the depreciation method that meets the company's objectives. The depreciation method that reports the highest net income in the first year is the blank method. It produces the blank depreciation expense and therefore the highest net income. So remember, these depreciation schedules, they affect the expense. So the company's goal is to have the highest net income in the early years. So if we want high net income, we need a low expense. So we're going to go and take a look at these depreciation expenses for the first year. So that's definitely not going to be double declining balance because, again, that is a very high depreciation there for that first year. I believe it's the highest of them all, so 39,600. And then for this one here, for the units of production, looks like their depreciation in the first year is at 20,250. Let's see if this first one, so straight line method here, is 18,000, and that is the lowest expense out of the three. So we'll take a look here and input that. So the straight line method is going to give us the highest net income because, again, it's taking out the least expense in the first year. So it produces the blank, the lowest depreciation expense, and therefore the highest net income. So let's take a look at our answer here. Nice work. Okay. So just all depends on that last portion here of the problem on what the company wants, whether they want a higher net income or lower, on what their choice will be as far as the depreciation schedule and method.